The hollow comfort of wealth often hides itself behind glittering surfaces. The man, Robert, lived in a world where marble floors gleamed under his polished shoes and silence filled the corners of his expansive home. His life was comfortable, predictable, and secure. Yet beneath the steady rhythm of business meetings, expensive dinners, and constant success, there was a quiet unease he never spoke of. He had everything a man could want, and still, he sometimes wondered why nights felt so long, why laughter seemed hollow, and why even his victories carried no warmth. One winter morning, while sitting in the back seat of his chauffeured car, Robert saw a man wrapped in a torn blanket, leaning against a building for shelter from the cold. For the first time, he did not simply look away. Something in the man's stillness, his fragile dignity, pierced through the comfort of the car's heated air. That night, unable to shake the image, Robert searched for a way to help. His search led him to a local shelter, where volunteers worked daily to care for the homeless. When he arrived at the shelter for the first time, Robert carried himself with confidence, as he always did. He wore a fine coat and leather gloves, and his cologne lingered faintly in the air. He told himself he was there to give back, to contribute his time where it mattered. But the reality inside was not what he expected. The air was thick with the smell of soup and damp clothes, and the room buzzed with voices of people who carried stories of loss, pain, and survival. Robert felt out of place. A man from another world suddenly dropped into a reality he did not understand. The older volunteer who welcomed him, Mr. Harris, had kind eyes and a calm presence. He handed Robert an apron and asked him to serve soup to the line of waiting guests. The task was simple, but the experience was not. As each person approached, Robert struggled to look them in the eye. He felt their tiredness, the roughness of their hands, the weight of their silence. Every bowl he passed across the counter seemed to carry more than just food. It carried the invisible weight of lives he had never dared to imagine. That night, when Robert returned to his mansion, the contrast was unbearable. He poured himself a glass of wine, but found it tasteless. He walked past his chandelier, yet it felt dim. The velvet chairs and the roaring fireplace could not quiet the echo of voices from the shelter. For the first time in many years, he felt the emptiness of his own comfort. The next morning, Robert returned to the shelter, though part of him resisted. He told himself it was an act of duty, but inside he knew it was something else, an uneasy pull that reminded him of the unease he had felt the night before. Mr. Harris greeted him with the same calm smile and handed him a broom this time. Cleaning floors was a far cry from the meetings and contracts Robert was used to, yet he bent down and began sweeping. With every movement, the polished image of himself began to crack ever so slightly. As the hours passed, Robert began noticing things he had overlooked the day before. He saw the way a young man carefully wrapped half of his sandwich to save for later. He heard the soft hum of an elderly woman singing to calm herself in the crowded room. He watched two men argue, then break into laughter, their bond carrying them through the chaos of their day. For the first time, Robert wasn't looking from the outside in. He was standing in the middle of lives that were raw, unshielded, and real. Yet, discomfort weighed on him. When one man asked Robert about his family, he hesitated. How could he talk about a life of abundance when those around him carried so little? The question lingered in his mind long after. That night, Mr. Harris sat with him after the shelter quieted down. He didn't offer advice, only a story. He spoke of his years as a teacher, of the struggles he had faced raising children on a modest salary, of the times he had felt invisible in a society that measured worth by wealth. Then he looked at Robert and simply said, "Empathy is not about fixing someone's life, it's about standing with them long enough to feel the weight of their shoes." Those words echoed inside Robert. He thought of how quickly he had assumed he could help by showing up, by offering his time. Yet, real help was not about arriving with answers. It was about listening, sitting quietly beside someone without judgment, and letting their world touch yours. One evening, Robert stayed late and found himself sharing a table with a man named Daniel. Daniel had once been a carpenter, his hands still bearing the calluses of years of work. He spoke softly of losing his job, his home, and eventually his family. Robert listened, and for the first time in years, he did not feel the urge to interrupt or offer solutions. He simply listened, and in that silence, he felt something shift inside him. When he finally left the shelter that night, Robert walked more slowly. The world outside felt different, colder, yes, but also fuller. He could no longer pass strangers on the street without wondering about their stories, their silent struggles. It was as if his eyes had been forced open, and though what he saw was painful, it was also profoundly human. One evening, after weeks of volunteering, Mr. Harris asked Robert to stay overnight at the shelter. A storm was rolling in, and the shelter was filling beyond its capacity. Robert agreed, though uneasily, realizing he had never spent a night without the cushion of luxury. He set aside his coat and lay down on a narrow cot, the thin blanket doing little against the draft creeping through the old windows. The sounds of restless breathing, coughing, and murmured dreams surrounded him. He did not sleep easily. At some point in the night, Robert rose and sat by the window. He watched the rain streak down the glass, the street outside shimmering under the glow of a single street lamp. For the first time, he felt the vulnerability of those who had nowhere else to go. The hardness of the cot, the chill in the air, the constant noise, it stripped away the illusion of comfort he had carried all his life. He thought of his warm bed at home, the silence of his mansion, the security that wealth had always guaranteed. And yet, in this moment of shared discomfort, he felt closer to the truth of human existence than ever before. In the morning, as sunlight pushed through the grey clouds, Robert helped serve breakfast. He was tired, his back ached, and his clothes smelled faintly of dampness. But when Daniel, the carpenter, clasped his shoulder and said, "Thank you for being here with us," Robert's heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth. For once, his presence was not measured by money or influence. It was measured by something deeper, his willingness to stand alongside others in their struggle. From then on, Robert's life began to change. He still returned to his world of business, but it no longer consumed him. The marble floors, the fine meals, the luxury, they no longer defined him. He found himself pausing more often, listening with more patience, looking at others with softer eyes. He discovered that empathy was not weakness, but strength. It was the bridge that carried him from isolation into connection, from hollow comfort into meaningful presence. Weeks later, Robert sat once more at the shelter, this time laughing with the residents as they shared a simple meal of bread and soup. His suit jacket hung over the back of his chair, forgotten. The room was alive with voices, each carrying weight, each carrying dignity. Robert realized that for years he had mistaken wealth for abundance, when in truth, abundance lived here in the bonds between people, in shared struggles, in quiet acts of kindness. That night, as he walked home under the glow of streetlights, Robert felt a lightness he had never known. Empathy had given him new eyes, and through them, he finally saw the world, not as separate, but as one shared journey. Sometimes it takes stepping into another's shoes to realize how fragile and interconnected our lives truly are. Robert's journey shows us that empathy is not an accessory to kindness, it is its very foundation. It is the courage to listen, to share in discomfort, and to see dignity where the world often overlooks it. When we open ourselves to empathy, the walls that divide us begin to dissolve, and we discover that true wealth lies in the simple act of being human together. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below, and consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more stories like this.